I know.
Hello, and welcome to this month's GoIndieNow Town Hall Special, Black Voices Matter in Publishing. I am Julia Allen, here to kind of get things kicked off, and then Miss Tonya Todd is going to be taking over with some fabulous panelists that we have to talk more about Black voices in publishing. Unfortunately, it is an underrepresented group in publishing, and we are very much looking forward to hearing some voices today. And with that, I will introduce Miss Tonya Todd, who is a writer and an actress. She is also involved in the Henderson Writing Group. Is that correct?
Henderson Writers Group, yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here today.
Well, I did an interview for Spilling Ink and was acquainted with you, and you were very gracious and asked me if I would like to help host this wonderful, very much needed topic.
Yes. So we have, like I said, some great panelists here today. I am actually going to be bowing out of this. We really want to center Black voices today. So I'm going to let Tonya take over and introduce these great people we have here. And I'll be back at the end of the show.
Well, before I have you guys introduce yourselves, I would like to say thank you, Julia, for inviting me to help out with this topic. And thank you, Joe and GoIndieNow, for giving us the platform.
Absolutely.
So I am going to have each of our guests to introduce themselves, and I'd like to start with Desiree, please.
My name is Desiree. I am a literary consultant, editor, interior and cover designer with degrees in publishing from Portland State University. I'm going to be teaching publishing in the fall, and I've mostly worked in comics and literary fiction, but I'm really ready to have this conversation and be really candid about it.
Now, Brian?
Oh, no, I'll go last. Ladies first. I'm going last.
So unfair. Okay, that's hi, everybody. My name is Latoya Smith. I am a developmental editor, literary agent. I've been in the business now about 20 years, working with both corporate publishers, independent publishers, as well as for myself. I've seen all aspects of the publishing business, so I'm really excited to kind of jump in and talk about not just what the problems are, but what we can do to tackle them. So thank you for having me.
And now Brian will deign us with his introduction.
My name is Brian Tan. I am a published author with Random Evolved Media, as well as one half of the podcasting duo, The Plotaholics. I write in urban fantasy and science fiction and horror. I have been writing, trying to write in the game now since about 2007. Last 5 years, I've just been really acquainting myself and getting to know some wonderful people and just trying to make my place.
I'm glad you're all here. Thank you for doing this. So our first question is, with the recent wave of support for Black Lives Matter, people in publishing have been making steps to show allyship with different hashtags like Black Voices Matter and Publishing Paid Me, and by opening their DMs for submissions and advice. What do you think about this effort?
I think it's twofold. I think, of course, it's providing and opening up genuine opportunities for these diverse writers to finally tell their stories. But I also think in some ways it is disingenuous because as an agent, I recognize certain editors whom I have pitched to, have conversations with, or just kind of watched their lines or lists over the years and never really saw a whole lot of active acquisition for these diverse projects. So sometimes I get a little frustrated because I think it's kind of like jumping on the trend, but are they genuinely interested in these projects? It's not always reflective in what they're actually bringing in, or you have them bring it in and then it does not gain the support that it really needs to work. And then they say, oh, well, we tried it. This is why we don't do it. Look how it didn't work. So what I hope is that this opens up the bigger conversation that they'll start bringing in publishing professionals of color that have a genuine interest in these projects. Because I think that's when there is an interest, that's when the best jobs get done on these books. And not to say that the people there don't want to do those jobs, but I do find that, a lot of it is not genuine and a lot of it is kind of capturing the moment. But when you talk about the execution, there's not much happening there to address the issue.
So when you say that they don't get the support, let's say that they are actually acquired, but they don't receive the support, what do you mean by that?
So I was an acquisitions editor for 10 plus years, and I would find sometimes, it would be a debut author and they would have to have a certain amount of sales. It would have to almost like sell itself for it to get marketing support, for the salespeople to get behind it. Whereas I would see other debut writers that were not of color, and it was like, oh, this sounds great, let's try it out. So it just seemed like they were more open to throw those dollars behind it and really figure out how to make it work, but then when it was a project of color, it was like, we don't get it, so we're just not gonna bring it on. And so then the challenge for me is that now you're saying, yay, bring it on, but have these resources change. Like, do you know how to market this book? Are you gonna spend the money to market it? And are you going to market it like, okay, well, this is now a Black book or an Asian book or a Latina book? Or are you just gonna say, this is a really good fantasy and we're gonna promote it like a really good fantasy? And so that's what I mean by support. And also, is the editor in-house being supported? Are they seeing their vision? Are they trying to encourage them to continue to bring these projects on? And by encouragement, yes, it is support in dollars. It is support in the excitement to publish those books.
And in not labeling it a specialty project?
Correct. Or even just to say, like, for example, I represent a lot of contemporary romance. And I've had publishers say, well, we don't know how to market this. And I'm like, well, how do you market your other cowboys?
Right.
Like, I don't understand why it's like, you don't get.
Why's it got to be different?
It's not like just the way you would promote that romantic suspense or that other fantasy novel. If anything, I think you have the added bonus to hit these targeted audiences as well as just your general basic reader of fantasy or romance or women's fiction, whatever it is.
What about you, Desiree? What are your thoughts on this recent wave of support?
Yeah, I'm not. So I'm of two minds about it. I think it's really important that people are looking, that people are ready to talk about it, that they are trying to take action. But what I'm seeing a lot of is just people being very overwhelmed. I'm seeing these, like, why this movement had to be built on the bodies of Black people is where the problem is. Like, we shouldn't have had to have a complete civil rights movement for publishers to decide that they wanted to increase their diversity in their staff, increase their diversity in entry-level positions, increase it in, and create positions even. I've seen a couple places creating agency positions for agents who have been blocked out from that sort of work just based on socioeconomic status and other systemic racism problems. But I really want to go back to just reiterating and like emphasizing how much publishers have to be able to maintain. They have to be able to say, like, we can do this now, but Black Lives Matter is going to keep happening. Black lives always matter. So it can't just be this month. It can't just be the next 2 months. It can't just be this year. They have to start making their changes. And that's why it's really important, I think, for us to start seeing not just hashtags. We need to start seeing, checking back in November and December and January and say, like, what's the diversity look like in this office? What's the diversity look like on your list? How have you created an actual literal safe space where Black voices are welcome and where those voices will be protected?
What about you, Brian?
I agree 100%. On one hand, it's like, all right, it's nice that you're trying to do something, but why have we had to be murdered like we mean nothing for this to happen? Why do you have to be told that our lives matter in hashtag? Why do we have to be our deaths have to be the flavor of the month for our voices, for our visions to matter? Why is us being killed the only reason that you've decided, hey, maybe we should bring in Black voices because we're out of touch? Why? And
why wasn't it the default, right?
Yeah. Why wasn't it the default? Why? And on top of it all, exactly, are you going to be wanting to hear our voices now because it's flavor of the week because you feel guilty? Or do you truly want us to be at the table where we belong and you are welcoming us? Because if you're not welcoming us for real, I don't want no part of it. I want to be left out. You know what? If you couldn't be bothered with me before, then you can go the hell on over there now. Yep. And you can take your fakeness and cram. I've got no patience. I've got no patience for fakeness. I really don't. Now, and that's why I've worked really, really hard, because I had to learn a lot of what I know now the hard way. And that's why whenever someone tells me, well, this person wants to be a writer and blah, 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 I'm like, all right, well then write. Do it. But when you start trying to get out there, make sure that your mentors are good people. Make sure you surround yourself by good people, because not everyone in this game, we all supposed to be on the same team as indie, but we ain't all on the same team. So you got to make sure that you choose the right people to be around. So I look at this as a prime example of that. Do they truly care about us and our stories and what we have to say? Or are we just so you can not feel guilty? Come talk to me in December, January, February, March, April. Talk to me in 2022. If you're still there, then we're good. Till then, I don't want nothing from you.
Yep. Okay, well, I want to jump off of that and say, all right, we're in July now. That movement, the publishing support happened in June. Now we're in July. What do you think is the next step in getting more Black voices represented in both the publishing world and in books? Because it's not just authors that need to be represented. It's the editors, it's the publishers, it's the literary agents, it's behind the scenes. What's the next step to make that happen?
I think we got to do what we've done in the past for our music, what we've done for our television. In some instances, some folks we got to make our own, just to make sure, and then we can partnering with others so that everyone gets a voice. That's at least part of the way I look at it. I mean, there are a lot of people there. I've met a lot of friends in the publishing world now, in the indie publishing world, that are like family to me. They're closer to me than people that I share DNA with. And I know I can go to them with whatever I need and they will listen to me and I'll be valued. But not everyone has that. So I think one thing that could be done is we just start making our own.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one way. Also, I think in terms of recruiting, what I found problematic was that a lot of the interns that were coming in were not people of color, even for the paid internships, because I know that's a big conversation that a lot of times, if students are coming from disadvantaged communities, they cannot afford to work for free. But we had paid internships, and it was rare that any person of color was recruited. So figuring out who is, supplying these interns into the publishers, because in most cases that's how they get the job. They kind of have an internship there and then go forward. Also, networking and helping each other. I mentor a lot of students, particularly women of color, and I try to teach them everything I know and hope that they can then go forth and be editors and publicists and authors. And I think that if more of us who were in these positions to help each other did that too, even in the corporate space, that's helpful as well, because that's what everybody else is doing. They're getting their friends' daughters and sons and cousins in. So we need to do the same. And I think recruitment is going to be the main thing. You got to get the talent in there, the editors, the agents, the art directors, all of these people, they all help to make the book successful. So I think, diversifying the whole process, and it starts in the colleges and recruitment.
I think there's also something there about how we need to make sure that we can retain these people. it's a pretty well-known fact that if you want to be successful in publishing, especially in like the big five publishing, you need to have money. Like somebody's got to be able to help you survive while you're making no money, because we don't pay very well either. So I think thinking about how we can keep retaining people, how we can promote like safe spaces and promote like retention and not turnover, not just like who's the next Black woman we can burn out in this internship, and then kind of toss to the curb. Like so many people have to leave New York of all races because they run out of money searching for that dream. So I've always been like a really big advocate for like the decentralization of publishing in some ways, which kind of loops into being able to lift our own up. There's no reason for, I think, Black-owned publishers, Black authors, Black agencies to be necessarily extremely consolidated in New York. I think it's possible to start building those networks in smaller independent publishers and indie spaces. And after a while, you'll have a community. You'll have a group of people in a town who do the same work and who have the same goals. And we can start building that community from the ground up.
We have a follow-up question on mentorship. This is from Rachel Chase. Brian mentioned mentorship, and I believe LaToya said something as well. How can publishing be better and providing mentorship opportunities that support Black publishing professionals?
That's a good question. I think for one, being willing to listen. Number one, you got to listen. And that includes if something is being said that you either don't want to hear or is a little bit uncomfortable for you, you got to be willing to listen, number one. Number two, you got to be willing to sort of, in a lot of ways, at least from my perspective, put ego aside and put privilege aside. What works for one doesn't work for everybody. You've got to just be able to just be open with open dialogue, open-minded, and it kind of even goes from the internship perspective. Don't sit there as soon as you get the body in there and burn them out. Help them to grow and learn the way you would want to learn and grow, and just go from there.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think, I know for me, I've reached out to a lot of people I know who work in some of these colleges. For example, Medgar Evers, City College. I've done things at Duke. And I basically just reach out and say, hey, I am looking for an intern, someone to help me out, learn the business kind of thing, and try to get them to have folks contact me in that way. Also, I teach a lot of classes about pitching, the publishing process, stuff like that. I think the biggest obstacle is access to information. So I'm just trying to be that sort of, voice, if you will, to kind of let people know, okay, here's what it is. So now that you have this information, you can decide if you want to be indie, if you want to, publish with a traditional publisher. But I think, as we know, with most publishing experiences, they are subjective. So I think the biggest issue that I've seen is a lot of authors, particularly of color, have tons of misinformation because they're asking friends, they're asking, the people that they know, and they don't really have the access to the professionals that are giving the real information. And so I think trying to, network and really provide those resources, and share and repost whenever things like this happen, or other talks and discussions and Instagram lives where people are sharing information and really sharing it with each other. Because as we know, with Facebook and a lot of these, media sites now, they all just want money. So unless you're like paying to promote some of the ads, it really takes us sharing and telling each other about things in order for us to know, because they kind of hide the info.
One more reason to appreciate the three of you giving your time and your feedback and your wisdom here. I do want to piggyback off of what you just said, because you mentioned that it is difficult for a Black author or an author of color to go the traditional route. And you mentioned some of the some of the challenges there, but what do you think some of the roadblocks are that Black authors face when attempting traditional publication? And what can we do about that?
Yeah, from my experience in the conference circuit, there are not a lot of affordable conferences in some of these inner cities where authors can access this information and not break the bank. You know, a lot of authors, when they start, they have day jobs, they have children, families, and they can't always afford $500 plus flight, plus room and board, plus registration. Like, they can't afford that. So I think that is one of the biggest obstacles, is getting to these conferences and paying for them for the information. One thing RWA actually has done to kind of revamp itself after all of the, you know, racial hoopla that happened over the holidays, is they're offering free registration for their members of color. So, you know, I think things like that to help, you know, provide access. And also now with, I think, COVID and things going virtual, it might make some of these resources more accessible, because now people don't have to travel to get the information. So I think that's one of the bigger obstacles, is, you know, the money to pay for these conferences and take time off work and travel and pay for hotels. Like, that can be a lot when you have a family and you have things to take care of, you know?
Definitely. What about you, Desiree?
I think I would have to agree with that almost entirely. Like, I think that the lack of information, the lack of ability to navigate, and I think also just the lack of being able to network depending on where you are. And it's all just sort of is cumulative to this point that by the time people are ready, they get their blasts out, right, to their agencies or to their publishers, but they're not really sure what they're doing. And then they hit this wall, and then we lose a lot of really good voices. I would also say that this idea that we have to be able to have a college education or be able to prove our abilities and prove our worth through so much pre-work, as if our stories are only valid if we have credentials for them. So for me, I want to see a lot more people doing outreach into communities that maybe don't have the same opportunities. I'd love to see more agencies, more publishers looking for stories in the places that exist, but just wouldn't even have the first sense of where to start. Again, decentralizing, knowing that, like, for example, Portland's a really, really niche little space. There's a lot of small publishers here, and they all have a cumulative culture that feels kind of quiet and diverse in like a genre way, definitely not in a race way. And it feels, so it's like, you know, there's publishers here. There's like 3 comics publishers. There's a lot of quiet nonfiction. There's a lot of white-oriented fiction. There's a lot of publishers doing really cool things here, but what they're doing without thinking about the full community. So we're thinking about, like, you know, downtown Portland, and the primary demographic of Portland is like 98% white. So there's so many barriers to the people who are pushed out of the city, the Black people, the Latina, the indigenous people who live here. They're all pushed really far out. And I've kind of talked to a couple local publishers about, you know, they said, how do we get those voices? How do we show them we want them? And I was like, well, I think, as we kind of discussed here, you kind of already burned your bridges in a lot of ways. You've already said to these people, your voices aren't important enough for us to pursue. These are people who have submitted to us and never even gotten a call back. And they've been telling you what they need, and you're not listening. But the first step is going to be building community between publishers and then the Black, Indigenous, POC communities, and showing that there's a safety there, that there's going to be support there, that there is a long-term opportunity, and that there's no need to rush if you're not ready. Because one of the things I'm seeing a lot of right now is, you know, we've opened this seat for an agent. We've opened this seat for editors. We've opened this. Send us your books. Send us your manuscripts. Send us everything you have. And, like, how many of us have sat on the floor just, like, feeling like garbage? Like, the other day, I lost track of time. I had a huge incident in my house. I just kind of melted down a little bit, and I laid on the floor and just cried, because everything is so bad right now, and it hits at the worst times. So, like, asking people of color, asking Black people especially right now to say, like, take advantage of this limited opportunity.
Right. You have your one shot right now.
Yeah, and I've seen
in the middle of this crisis. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, there's more than one crisis going on. In the
Yeah.
middle of all of these crises.
Yes.
Put
This
your
is your
emotions
shot.
aside. Put your emotions aside and do what we
Yes.
want. We're
Right.
calling you.
And what's crazy is I've seen many of these already close. I've seen many of these like go like from like, how quickly do you want to hire these people to like as soon as possible? A job opening still open 2 weeks. Do you know how many people are just feeling like garbage on their couch right now, or trying to worry about what's going to happen when their unemployment ends? Like, we don't think, like, I think white publishing has to start thinking about all the ways they benefit, and they have to start looking at how those benefits mean that they get those opportunities. They get to walk into those opportunities without worrying about all of those other pieces. And there was a great New York Times article today that came out about being Black in publishing that everybody should read, because it's not behind a paywall. And it's so honest. It's like walking into that door, knowing you're carrying the weight of racism on your back, regardless of what color you are, and how you're contributing to it is so critical to breaking down all of these barriers.
Absolutely.
And then the weight of having to answer for all of the Black stories that come in, as though there's only one story.
And also, I also would like to point out that there is a problem with white publishers acquiring Black, Indigenous, POC books and stories, because that makes them the arbiters of what's authentic. And as a light-skinned, biracial Black woman, like, my experience is going to be so much different than all three of yours, just like out the gate. And it's like this idea that like there have been times where I was hired to be the magical Negro in the office. I'm the Black friend, right? I'm the one, like I'm the light-skinned safe one who's going to not say anything when you guys say something wrong, but I'm going to be the person you cite to be the person who said this was okay. And race is not a monolith at all.
No, it's not.
So you have to like really be thinking about why, like where all these steps are and why we need to have editors, we need to have agents, we need to have interns of color. All these people should have a voice.
Absolutely.
So what you said, I've been rejected for my manuscript by white agents telling me that it's not authentically Black enough.
Yeah.
What?
And like, who are you to say?
Who are you to tell me that?
Right. Like, please tell me, how can I be Blacker? You know,
like, what do you want me to do?
Do you want me to misspell every other word? And so you can, when you read the words, you feel like you're watching Boys in the Hood. Is that going to make me be Black enough for you? It doesn't work that way.
We won't be though. We'll never be we'll never be the Black that they want in that moment. They want a certain kind of Black. They want a certain kind of person. They want a certain kind of story. They want the hate you give. They want our pain on display. They want our agony. They want our death on display as entertainment, and we're not.
Right.
Yeah, they want.
That's another thing. Is, well, why don't you focus on the micro tension that goes on every day rather than it just being in the background? No, let that be the focus of the story.
Yeah.
That's a different story, and that's not the one I've told, you know? And there are those stories, and they are important, but we shouldn't have to only tell one story.
I recall when I first was trying to get my book out, they told the agent that I queried to first said, well, you're right, your book's about vampires, and because of Twilight, no one's going to want it. And 2, no one wants Black Twilight. I'm like, my book ain't Black Twilight. My book ain't even Twilight. Just because I have a Black lead character don't mean it's Black. Come on. I got so mad. And I tried to tell myself that all of my queries that I got, I was denied, I would save them all and use them as fuel. I deleted that one so fast after I read it. I was like, it just infuriated me. I almost quit writing. I really did.
Well, now I really want to read this book. So.
But I mean, and to take, take a little bit of what Desiree said. I mean, it's like it gets real frustrating because me as a Black man, I can't in a professional setting have emotion because I get told that I'm intimidating. It's like, so if I'm not happy about something, I have to just sit here and be a robot and take it because you're intimidated if I have a frown on my face. I've had a lot of jobs where I was the only Black person there. And people would just look to me and be like, oh, well, if I can say this around you, I can say it in full, right? No, it doesn't work that way. You damn sure can't say. I remember I had a boss who would come because I was working night shift, and he'd come in and go, "Hey, good morning, Buckwheat." I'm like, "Excuse you?"
No.
And I was like, "Bro, my name ain't Buckwheat." Okay. No. He was like, "Well, I mean, I had a black friend and I called him Buckwheat. And I said, well, I ain't your black friend. Well, can I call you Bubba? No. So what should I call you? Brian.
Right.
The name on my birth certificate.
Why is this conversation still happening?
Exactly.
It's like abort.
Yeah.
We do have another question from the audience, from J.M. Landels. As a publisher, I'd love to publish more short fiction from POC. My problem is that it's hard to identify those writers in the slush pile. Any suggestion? And I want to add to this, like I hear that question, but I have to say, as an author who has had to query, it's an uncomfortable thing to have to identify yourself.
Yeah.
One thing that pisses me off, don't ask me my race.
Yeah.
Don't ever ask me my race. I will flip out on you.
It was a hard decision to make because I started off not mentioning it at all because I didn't think it was important. But if you start saying own voices, then you're owning up to it.
Right.
But what if you're LGBTQ and you weren't ready to let the world know this kind of thing yet? You know what I mean? It's sort of outing people.
I had to identify myself as a black man because my last name being Tan, people thought I was Asian. I even had creditors and telemarketers have an Asian employee call and speak to me in the different dialects, and I'm like, I'm black. Why are you talking to me in a language I don't know? Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me click. So I had to. Like my mother specifically told me, she gave me the first name Brian so that it wasn't hard for people to say, so no one would know. But then with my last name,
we have a manuscript request for Brian right now.
Yeah, Jonesy's been threatening me with the cattle prod for a little while now for my stuff. You know what? I will write something specifically to query to you, Jonesy. I promise.
But to J.M. Landel's question,
mm-hmm.
How, if you're trying to be an ally, how do you identify those stories that you're trying to help?
It's hard because.
Right. There's
because
no pretty answer. I mean,
it really isn't.
Yeah, I think there's a couple decent ways of considering it. I think that it's time to stop putting the onus on POC creators and Black creators to tell who they are, and to do that, I think it's time to do the work. I think it's time for publishers to find people they want to publish. I mean, we all have social media presence. A lot of us have websites. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're doing the work.
We have websites.
Every single Black person I know in publishing is doing the work.
Right.
They are there and pushing themselves, and they're not hard to find. So I really think
might have to come to us.
Yeah, I think it's time.
I
really think it is time for them to start coming to Black writers, because, like, how many times do you expect a dog to come to you and get kicked before they stop?
Exactly.
Like, and I don't like anybody's going to be like, how many times are you going to rebuff me? How many times are you going to tell me I'm not worthy? How many times are you going to tell me my story's not authentic? Yeah. Like before I stop trusting you, and I just go to people who will validate my story as my story. I think the need for own voices is its whole other thing, right? This idea that we have to have own voices as a concept because we couldn't, like, white people couldn't stop just writing other people's stories for them. But I do think that it's time. Yeah,
that's Jonesy's favorite.
Did you see what Rebecca Jonesy said?
Yeah. That's Jonesy's thing, is the cattle prod.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's cattle prod them directly into those communities that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. Let's go talk to those people. Go to high schools. Do you know how talented Black high school writers are? Holy crap!
My God, they're
crap!
Innovators.
Like, do you know how talented the Black students have to be in MFA classes? Do you know how talented we have to be just to get the same as everybody else? You're not going to go wrong.
When Ice Cube was writing Straight Outta Compton, he was still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, here's a little secret that I want to bring out there. We don't want stuff given to us. We want to earn our place. So we're not going to sit here and be your token handout people. It doesn't work that way. We want our work to be appreciated on its merit, not because, look at me, I have a Black writer's book. So we don't want to be your reason to still have your own prejudices and say, oh, well, I do this, so I'm an ally, right? Wrong. No, we don't want that. We don't want that shit given to us.
Right. Also, I think for me, a couple of things. For the query letter, usually somewhere in there, oftentimes, depending on the subject matter, sometimes you can tell. If you go further into the writing, just like when describing any characters, usually someone will mention a skin tone or something like that. So sometimes by the characters, you might say, oh, okay, you know, if it's POC predominant, you assume the author it might be of color. I've done that before. So I actually use Query Manager now, where the author has to provide their website and other links. And so I'm able to then go a step further and just like check them out. And then you can kind of easily see. And not to say that I feel like this question will probably come up, but I'm not saying that white authors cannot write about characters of color. The problem is that some of them are doing it because they know that's what publishers want, so it's not genuine. And then the even bigger problem is you have authors of color writing these same stories about themselves, their own stories, but those are not being picked up. The white authors writing about these people's experiences are being picked up. So I find that a lot of times when I'm having conversations about this, you know, you have kind of like white authors like, well, what can we do? And how can we diversify our stories? And it's like, this is not for you. Like this conversation.
It has nothing to do with you.
Keep doing what you do. Like you don't have a problem. This is for us, you know, the people of color that are not being given the platform for the stories that are just as good. And we're told, hey, there's no market. But then you have, you know, so I think that's kind of what helps me. I don't know if this helps you, JM, but definitely like, you know, for me, the Query Manager where I can then kind of check out the author, especially if the story is heavily rooted in something that is specifically a Black culture experience or Latino culture experience, etc. Sometimes it's kind of clear in the writing or the author's bio, but if not, I would take a step further and just kind of check the author out.
So what you're saying is you're doing the work. You're putting in the extra effort to go check out this person and see something about them. So that's really a great answer, though. And I just want to add one thing, that it might not be a bad idea to put on your submission website. If you feel comfortable mentioning this, please do. But don't make them feel like they have to in order to be considered. Just leave it as an option so that they know, yes, I'm open to it, but it's not going to be the only reason I would consider your work, you know, that kind of thing.
The thing that I think is most important, which goes back to my point that I made at the beginning of this conversation, is don't just get talking. So if you actually start doing the work to bring these authors of color on, they're going to find you. They're going to know that you're actively not just saying, hey, I want these authors, but you're actually signing them. You're getting them placement in publishing houses, or you're acquiring them and you're getting them published. And with time, they'll say, oh, okay, well, so-and-so, okay, I see they have this person and that person. I see they've published this person and that person. So sometimes, especially for those initial steps, you have to show and prove. Because as Brian said, now, you know, those authors are looking at you kind of sideways, like, do you really have an invested interest? Or, you know, are you just trying to fill a quota on your list? And so I think the work, doing the work, as you said, Tonya, is really, you know, also going to show those authors and make them feel comfortable to start specifically, you know, submitting to you, because they know that you actually are looking for those projects and are going to do something with them.
Right, because no one wants to be treated like a trophy. You want a friend, an ally, a partner in this, but you don't want to be, hey, this is my project, see what I did?
And that is the worst feeling in the world to have. I hate that feeling.
Right, or the token, or the test dummy.
Yeah.
Like I tell my clients,
Hi, Mom, I have to say hello to my mother because I just got her.
I'm like, I don't know if we want to be the test dummy. Let's let somebody else. Let's just try it on someone else and we'll see how it goes. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go there.
Yep, you ain't wrong. Because I mean, the one thing that really also, when it comes to us telling our voice, you know, telling our stories and in our own voices, I mean, sometimes it also deals with the editing as well. You know, you got to make sure, you know, we're talking about putting in the work with finding out who the authors are, but you also got to put in the work to know who your editors are going to be too, because you don't want to take away the voice of the story. You know, you got to find someone who can make sure the voice is still represented while editing the work to give it the best shine it can possibly have. It takes work. It's going to take changing things, getting out of the comfort zone that has become the norm. It's time. It's a new day, and it's time to really take things to that next level. I mean, excellence has to be, you've got to make changes for excellence.
So we do have another question from Regine Nabid. So say you're a publisher and you get some manuscripts and accept one, and it just turns out to be a POC. Is that something that goes into the marketing for the manuscript, or do you not crow about it?
Okay. So I think this is not a question for us. It's a question for your author.
Yeah.
So the book I have been thinking about working on is something of a memoir about my experiences as a biracial Black woman trying to like find their identity in this space and in the world. That's important to my marketing. I would have to be comfortable with that, because otherwise you don't know what gives me the credentials to talk about that experience. But I don't think, as we kind of discussed a little bit earlier, that if you get a book from somebody that's just Twilight for Black people, let's say, did they say that? The question is, did they say that? Did they come into your queries and say this is Twilight for Black people? Because if they did, then they're comfortable. And you probably need to ask them why they think they're comfortable with that. But there's definitely it's a case by case basis. I would never ever in my wildest dreams want to other somebody more than the world already does. And I think that choosing to base their marketing plan on a foundation of their race is somewhat irresponsible unless they're on board with it and they want to do that. And if it's not really relevant to the story, then it's not relevant to the story. Now we're entering like kind of a sticky wicket here, because we're in a world right now where we need to start funneling our money back into Black communities, and we need to start funneling our time and our energy and our resources back into Black communities and Black voices and Black representation, because we're seeing in the world what happens when you don't. But yeah, I don't think you should ever say like, I got this Black book, let's just crow about this Black book.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that.
No.
The only time I would want any sort of anything put on is when it comes to what category are we going to put this on Amazon. And even then, I mean, I just want my book to, I want the quality of my book to speak for itself. You know, it shouldn't matter that I'm a Black man. It shouldn't matter. It should just be that I wrote a book that people like, you know? So, I mean, when you look at any of my promo stuff that I post, there's nothing in the copy that says, oh, this is a Black lead character. No, what you see is in the image, you've got the character represented, and that's it. And I treat it as, it doesn't matter. He's a lead character. If I do say so myself, as a badass character, and he's a Black guy. I don't need to point that out. You can look at the image of him and know he's Black. You know,
at least if they market it.
Right.
At least they put him on the cover, right? We have to talk about how we don't put Black people on the cover of our books too.
Right. All of my lead characters are Black men. So far, all my lead characters are Black males. So you can't not put the brother on the cover. You just can't. But I mean, even in some of the marketing, I had an instance where I asked with another group that I was involved in. I said, well, why aren't I being marketed? Well, you know, you're not really a big selling author. And it's like, all right, I get that. This is like one of my first works, but so what can I do to, get you to start marketing me at all? You know, am I not marketing myself enough? No, you're doing fine. All right, just checking. Next thing I know, I wasn't getting marketed at all anymore. I was doing all of my own posting. I was doing all of my own stuff. double time even. So I mean, hey, I don't know what the deal was or wasn't. That's in the past. At least now my publisher backs me now completely. So
you found your people.
Yeah, I found my folks, and like I said, most all of my lead characters are Black men. So if he's going to be on the cover, he's going to be on the promo art. Now, what sucks is sometimes it's hard to find good Black models that they would use in some of the promo stuff.
Yeah.
That's hard as hell to find. I was going through some of that stuff for hours trying to find the right look, and it's always the same couple of people. It's like, there's other Black folks that model too. You can get their stuff. You get the same three people.
Right. I know. I write a blog about love, and I try to rotate the different types of people I have on there, but I can't afford to pay for the photos, so I have to use the free sites, and there's not a whole lot of options there. And you don't want it to be the same couple over and over again.
Yeah, it's like, really? How many times are we going to use this guy DeAndre? That doesn't even work. Like
he's hot, but we don't want people to think he's the same character as all these other stories, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm trying to find a buff guy, and it's like, this guy looks like a darker Bobby Lashley. That's not quite the character. Can I find? No. All right.
Guess we're using him.
Yes, I guess we're using extra chocolate Bobby Lashley this time around. Okay.
That is it.
Yeah.
That's it, Rebecca. I need more POC and more LGBTQ stock photo pictures.
Absolutely. That's another thing.
That you get some more Black photographers. Like I've even been telling some of my photographer friends, like publishers need you guys. So start taking those beautiful images and start making those acquaintances with those publishers, because they're outsourcing a lot of stuff, especially now with COVID. They have nothing. They can't do photo shoots. So one of my authors and I actually have this issue because her heroine is a curvy plus size dark skinned woman. And I mean, how many stock images are there of that? So we're just like, she's already got her photographers that specialize in Black covers and curvy women. Like we just have them ready because we already know they're not going to be able to do it. But again, that's when you as the author and your agent, that's when you guys have to help them out. Because it's like, okay, they're giving you a shot, but let's be real, a lot of them have no idea. So they're taking directive from you. And so, which is unfortunate if you, the author, have no idea also. So I'm just thankful that I have that kind of corporate publishing kind of background experience where I can then say, all right, guys, let's do this, let's do that. This will work, that'll work. Because sometimes they really don't know and they're looking to you to help them. Which again can be frustrating because it's like, just go sell it the way you sell all your other fantasy or all your other, nonfiction. Like you said, Desiree, unless that's what the book is about. Like if that's the subject matter, then obviously, yes, it's going to be very targeted. But outside of that, especially when you're talking about genre fiction, it is not rocket science. The fact that I'm Black should be an added bonus. The fact that this is Latina or LGBTQ or that should be added bonus. Sell it, whatever it is predominantly, you go sell it like that, the way you do everything else.
Right.
Like that.
Based on the merits of the book.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in the Black community, I'm glad that we're getting to a point now where we're not sort of putting each other down anymore. Because I remember when I was younger, I was getting told how white I was because I was into role playing and I was into different things. That's another thing too in the Black community that we need to do for ourselves. Quit putting each other down because we're into our own shit. All right. If Lil Tyrone is into swords and sorcery, let him be into swords and sorcery. Let him cosplay up as swords and sorcery. Because guess what? There's going to be a Black author that's going to write a novel that is swords and sorcery bound. And he's going to have his idea. Well, you know what? I like Conan the Barbarian, but you know what? I want a Black Conan the Barbarian. And guess what? That little Tyrone that's doing his thing. Now you catch someone.
Tyrone the Barbarian.
Tyrone the Barbarian. And that's something else that we need to stop doing to ourselves as a community. Let us be into what we're into. Not all of us are into hip hop. Some of us are into metal. Let us be into metal. Let us be in the Norwegian metal. Let us be into what we're into. So that way we can have our influence.
Right. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to like.
Mm-hmm. I remember I came home. One of my aunts heard me listening to a Metallica CD. Why are you listening to that white music? Because I like Metallica. I didn't realize I needed your permission to like Hetfield. You know, that's something that we need to do as a people, is let us be into our own thing and don't challenge our blackness because we're into that. It's hard for me to I was so looking forward to streaming The Fresh Prince on HBO Max, and the laughter that I used to have at Will picking on Carlton, it's not there anymore, because and every time I notice Carlton has to defend himself in his blackness just because he's into things different. And I'm looking at that now as a 41-year-old man, and I'm like, you know what? He's right. And he's had to say that a couple of times in episodes. So that's something that we need to stop doing to ourselves so we can be more prosperous.
So that brings me to another question, is let's talk about tropes and stereotypes when it comes to Black characters in literature. What are some of them and how are they harmful?
Those stereotypes, I swear I'm getting tired of seeing the quote sassy Black woman that's always child. I'm so sick of seeing that. That is not.
Can you do that again? I missed it.
Child. I'm so sick of that. I'm so sick of seeing that, because that is not every Black woman. And there's some Black women when they get any woman, when a woman gets quiet, that's when you need to be scared. And not all Black women get the loud. Sometimes they get even quieter. Like I knew I was in trouble with my mother when she just got quiet. As long as she was yelling, I was safe. But as soon as that voice got silent, that was my ass.
And I just want to say, since my mother's watching, that she's white and she was never quiet.
and that's one stereotype that needs to be gone. Not all white women are quiet, meek, and mild. Not all Black women are really, really loud. It's personality.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
That's just one that pisses me
off. I had a similar experience as one of you guys. I forget now who's Tonya. I think it was you. I submitted a project to an editor, and it was a very lighthearted rom-com, actually. And the editor came back and said that she didn't think it was deep enough, and that she felt like the author could be more deep and emotional. And so the author and I were like, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, she's a contemporary romance writer. Like, none of her books are deep. So, and so at that point, I just recognized that the editor has no effing clue. And she's looking for a slave narrative that she's not going to get over here. And so I no longer submit to her. But, you know, I think that's sadly the issue. And I think that, you know, this is the danger of television, right? Because they keep force feeding us these, you know, images of these sassy Black women, of these side chicks, of these kind of derogatory stereotypes for entertainment. And then people begin to think that this is all Black women, you know, or this is all Black men, that they just have a bunch of babies and they don't take care of their families. And it's not true. But if this is all you see, and you may not be around a lot of Black people, so it's like, oh, okay, this is how they act. And then that translates into your relationships, into what you think the culture is. And then now you think you're an expert. And it's like,
right.
You know, I also shopped another project from another Black woman, also rom-com, very lighthearted. And it was kind of about, you know, a woman who has everything, you know, right, but love. And her life feels stale. And so she's trying to create a bucket list of sorts to challenge herself to take risks to truly be happy. And I had a white editor tell me that plot line was unrealistic.
That's something that would happen for anybody.
Correct.
Yes, Kate. Yes.
That plot line is unrealistic.
That is the most universal.
So, you know, I get it, guys. It is really crappy. And so that's why I get angry, because trust me, this conversation is not started with just George Floyd. I've been on panels, I've been in rooms, in conversations with presidents, with CEOs, trying to figure this out. And it's like, let's go beyond the conversation. You know, we keep talking around the same thing, but what is happening to diversify the staff? And as you said, Desiree, to retain them, because that was the main reason I left corporate. No support. You know, it started to get to a point where I'm like, okay, my colleagues are bringing up stuff, it's getting through, but I'm almost like being pigeonholed into this particular type of book. I can't really do this type of book. So now agents don't want to submit to me because I can't acquire anything. And when I felt like that was harming me, I resigned. You know, and it was, you know, I love my old company. They're wonderful. You know, I had no personal beef, but at the same time, it was like, I didn't feel like I was growing. I felt like they had a vision for me and that was it. Like they just was pushing me in that direction. And it didn't really matter that, you know, certain things were kind of important and I felt like they should pay attention. And it was funny because when I was interviewing for a new job, that was the first thing I said. Well, I want to publish Black books. Is that something important to you? Yes, I have my own company now.
Well, the problem is that supporting us, when it sounds so great to them in theory,
right?
But now when it comes down to do the work and really support us, whoa, now it's too much.
And this is not all publishers and all. No. Please understand, you know, there are
not everybody.
People that are genuine in their, we just want to publish good books. There are a lot of folks like that, but there are more, especially the president level and the publisher level, that are not. And they're used to the big books being from non-POC unless you're Chris Rock or Kevin Hart. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so that's the challenge. And that's why I love the position that I'm in, because as a developmental editor, I can help the indie author like Brian, or I can, as an agent, help the other author that wants to be, you know, that we can get in-house. So I don't have
You're getting high fives from the audience.
Yeah, I don't want to pick and choose. Thank you, Rebecca. We need to meet because I feel like
Wait, this is COVID. Fist bumps. It's COVID.
I just blow kisses.
It's super important. Like,
no touching.
I don't want to pick and choose. And I feel like there are so many authors that I feel like had a bad perception of me because they felt like I personally did not want to work with them. And it wasn't that. I just did not have the support in-house. And a lot of the decisions that are made are not ours. Well, I'm speaking for the acquisition editor, but it's not our choices. Like, we have a whole board that has to say yes before they let those books in. So, okay. Sorry. But it's super important. And I think, you know, that's where we got to start. We got to go beyond the conversation and get those publishing professionals to hire more people of color to work on these books too, not just now.
Yeah.
So we are getting close to an hour, and I want to shift the conversation just a tiny bit. What do you think about cancel culture now that people are being held accountable for past racism?
Cancel culture is not a thing. You're getting held responsible for your actions. I'm super sorry that you're a trash person. That's my opinion on cancel culture. So my boyfriend.
I love your automatic answer.
Sorry. So my boyfriend and I, my boyfriend's white as well. So he has this joke where when somebody gets fired or there's some crazy lady out there like causing havoc, and we're seeing, you know, these horrible videos of these women treating Black people like terribly, way worse than people have seen in the past, though it's always been there. And he goes, if you're racist and you're fired, it's your fault. He just sings a little song about it. And that's what cancel culture is. Like, this idea, this white terror behind cancel culture. Like, in my opinion, cancel culture has always been about your culture. Like, we collect our own. Like, we go out there, we're like, hey, whoa, you need to come back into this fence and we need to talk about what you just did. Like, that's, for me, cancel culture is like your community telling you like, no, dude, we're just not going to put up with it.
It's not cool.
It's over. Like, you've done this. You've gotten chances. You've had the support. You've had people there to pick you up when you needed help. We helped you here. We helped you there. And now you're not giving back to us. So you're canceled until you can prove that you're part of this culture. I don't think cancel culture is for anybody but the people in that culture. I think that, so I think these people chiming in about cancel culture, like, oh, cancel culture is not real. Cancel culture is going to ruin my life. How am I ever supposed to talk to a woman again if I can't walk up to her? Like, if you're not being a creep, we're not going to cancel you. And like, I'm talking as like a publishing community.
If you're worried, you're probably doing something wrong.
I truly believe that. I truly think that if you are not a sociopath who thinks that it's okay to demean people of color and women in your office, that thinks it's okay to take their like other people's accomplishments and claim them for yourself, if you're not doing these negative behaviors that we are all very vocally calling out, and if you're concerned that you might be, you lack that sociopathic element. Like, I don't ever really worry that I'm super mistreating people. I'm a human and I make mistakes. I'm also sort of awkward in public sometimes, so I'm very clumsy. So things are going to happen, right? But nobody's going to cancel me because I messed up. They're going to cancel me because I display a series of systemic behaviors that are causing harm to my community. So I think that this idea that cancel culture is for anybody other than their community is a problem. And I also think this idea that white people think that suddenly they're being unfairly judged by cancel culture is another, because again, nobody's doing this. Nobody made you do these things. Nobody's making you have people or let people of color be, I don't know, what was the one, the Cards Against Humanity, the guy that got like admitted to a mental hospital because they said he was crazy for calling out racism in his office. Like, these are the insane things we're hearing. And like, you canceled yourself. What are you talking about? You targeted this man and put him in a position that took away his agency, that took away his humanity, that made him feel powerless. And you did it all because you could.
Right.
I think a lot of what it turns into, for one, like, the Hartley Sawyer from The Flash, and there, a lot of people are like, oh, but he said that stuff 8 years ago and blah blah blah, and he could have grown. Yeah, he probably could have, but guess what? There's still an accountability. If I did something wrong to somebody when I was 20, and here I'm 41 years old, and they come to me and be like, look, what you did to me really hurt me, I still owe them an apology. There's no statute of limitations on apology. And now as far as, that particular example with Hartley Sawyer, I look at it like this. If Jesse L. Martin or Candace Patton don't care about working with him after the stuff he said back in the day, that's between them and him. But their bosses decided what he said was so bad that they didn't want to be bothered with him. So it is what it is. Bottom line is, if you was racist, if you said something racist, it's going to come back to haunt you one way or another. Be prepared to own what you do. I haven't always been the best human being, and I'm sure some of the mistakes that I've made in the past, I'm going to have to answer for. And you know what I will say? I was young. I was dumb. I had no right to do it. I'm a different person now, but I want to make amends for the wrong that I have done because I owe it to somebody. I wouldn't call it me being canceled. It's my chickens coming home to roost, and you just got to accept it. So if you racist and you fired, it's your fault.
It's so interesting that you guys are talking about this, because this makes me think a few weeks ago, a couple of literary agencies actually canceled themselves because they made some not so great comments, and some of their staff was like, I'm out.
Bye.
And, one of them folded, and the other one is trying to actually sue the other agents for defamation because they reposted whatever she had said. And it's really unfortunate because I know both of them, and I'm just like, I'm a little disappointed. And I think that sometimes, like, if you don't quite know what to say, maybe you just shouldn't say anything.
Discretion is the better part of valor. My mother told me that. It's true. Sometimes you should just shut your cake hole. Sometimes, it's better to wonder if you're an idiot than actually say it and confirm you're an idiot.
Right, and now everybody knows.
And now everybody knows.
Social media, I mean, yeah, you can eventually come out of it, but it is strong. And for that moment, you are canceled. And it's even if you apologize, it's going to take a while before people do not consider. So you almost have to go into hiding and completely revamp your shit before you come back.
That's right.
Yeah, but one of them doubled down. It was like, oh, really? Well,
and it's like, you know what? It's like when you're a kid, you do something wrong, you get put on punishment. Accept your grounding, because when you try to double down, it's gonna be worse. Now you're a bigger asshole. I mean, that's just like I try not to get confrontational. I have made it a point now that I am no longer going to be responding to certain things that I see on social media. If I didn't need social media for my networking and my writing, I wouldn't even be on it, because personally, I hate social media. I say this all the time. But I'm not going to get into any more of these discussions with people, because it just gets nasty. And then my blood pressure gets up, and then I want to fight somebody. And I'm too old and fat to be fighting. So I don't want nothing to do with it. But I mean, I put an author on blast a couple of weeks ago, because we were with the same publisher. We were technically colleagues, but I didn't like the guy because I didn't like his attitude. And he sent my writing partner a real disrespectful message about George Floyd. And she called him out. So then I went on his page and called him out. I'm like, look, you don't go to her and saying crap like that. And you damn sure don't talk about George Floyd like that. I don't care what was in his past. That wasn't earned. No. And he came back at me and tried to call me a racist for whatever reason. It's like, nice deflection. You're still wrong. And you're still an asshole. You know, it's like, no. And
some people are really revealing themselves right now.
They really are. And it's sad, because I had another instance. This guy we had 25 mutual friends. One of them was a guy and his wife who helped get me my start when I did stop writing for a while, and I got into audiobook narration. But now that they're all buddies with this guy, me and this guy went into a long-standing argument. And I'm more mad at myself for taking his bait on things. But it's like, dude, who are you around that you act like this? Who else are you poisoning? Like,
right, because there's a ripple with all of this, and how you respond to it will ripple too. I mean, we have everyone has a responsibility for how they are engaging with other people, and this person is putting some poison into the world.
And roll up that social contract and swat them on the nose with it.
There you go. Sometimes they need it. They need it. But at the same token, I think some of these people that are out there, they're not happy unless they're getting somebody's goat. And I think that some of these people on social media, they won't have the courage to say anything like that like they do to a black person's face. But when they feel like they can get your goat on social media, they can walk around. Yep, I got it. Them shoulders swinging with that wimpy swag.
Yes. Oh my goodness. My friend calls them keystroke gangsters.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's true.
Great.
Oh, they're so tough. They're so tough behind that keyboard.
Yeah.
I see some of them sitting in a Starbucks. Oh, I'm gonna get them now. and as soon as a brother and sister come in and order, they're like, no.
Yeah.
It's the only good. The one main positive about a lot of it is that these people are putting themselves out there, and people are finding out who they are.
They're wearing their signs. They're wearing the badge that says steer clear from me. You don't want any of this because I am vile.
Yep.
Thank you for letting us know.
And it's been great to see them getting like ousted. Like, so I come from comics and graphic novels, science fiction, fantasy, which has been having the most powerful reckoning I think I've seen on social media in a really long time. And the number of people who are like bestsellers, and people are like, well, that's over. Not doing that anymore. People stepping down from leadership positions. Like, there's going to be a lot of reorganizing, and there's going to be a lot of space for Black people to be brought to this table that we've all wanted to be at.
That's what Roland Martin says. He goes, I love seeing a white racist get fired, because as soon as they get fired, Black people should come in and apply for that job. Like,
absolutely. And I think now is definitely the time for that, because at the risk of sounding cynical, I worry about how long this will last. And I think that getting in there now is like, if we have the energy, if we have the time and the motivation, It's really, really important for people who aren't white to be in these positions, because as somebody just said in the comments, like it's kind of perpetuating like this psychological violence, and it's always in.
Right.
It's always like, so it's in our offices, it's in our workplaces, it's from the point that we query to the point that we publish and beyond that, because if you publish and the book is
yeah, I'm in trouble.
I
am in trouble.
If you publish and the book isn't well received, or if it's really well received by the Black community and maybe not so much by the alt-right community, like who, at my first publisher that I worked for, I asked them, I had one book that was owned by Black creators, and I said, if this is what they're dealing with in the lead up, I'm going to be standing in front of them when the people show up at the booth for signatures and call them foul names. I'm going to be there when people are yelling at me on social media, but where are you going to be standing? Where are you as a publisher going to be standing? Because if it's not behind me and not behind them, you're not doing the right thing. Exactly. And you need to be like, and they can't be shielded. Your job. Yeah, they're not, you have to shield them. Like there is so much more that goes into working with POCs and protecting this space that's meant to be sacred for all of us. Writing is for everybody. There's no reason for us to be gatekeeping it out. So that like we have to know, I think the best thing anybody can take away from this conversation from my point of view is just knowing that we're here, we're out here. We have stories, we want to talk, we want to be part of this community, even though this community has told us over and over and over again how much it doesn't really care that we want to be here. So, I mean, the fact that we're still trying, I think says something to our own willingness to be part of this social contract that I mentioned. Like, and we need to be like, now that there's these openings and these gaps, these companies need to start thinking about who have they seen making big strides in publishing? Who have they seen holding conversations like this? Who do they think are like the new thought leaders for this next generation of publishing, and getting those people into positions of power now, giving them those opportunities. Like Latoya's been working in publishing for, you said 15 years? Like there's almost 20 years. There is no reason that you wouldn't be perfect on a panel of people running a publisher if you wanted to be. There's no reason that I, with 3 degrees, shouldn't be able to get a job over any white man in comics who's just like starting a comic publisher with his friends. But there's this insidious racism that needs to be addressed, and until it's addressed from the inside, until white people can sit down and say we are contributing to this, whether we mean to or not, we're not going to see change in the long term. We have to get people of color in there whose voices can be heard and respected, not just we have a Black person on the panel, we have a Black person on the board, we have a Black person in editorial, they said it's okay. You're putting people in really, really horrible positions by asking them to say like, if I have to choose between saying this book is racist, we can't publish it, and losing my job and my well-being, what sort of fairness is that? What sort of world is that where I have to choose between eating and being moral?
Right.
And supporting my community.
And on top of that, especially as a male, guys, we need to get over ourselves. Women geek out just as hard as we do, if not more. Accept it and quit being afraid to take cues from women. If you are in a heterosexual relationship, your woman knows what's best for you. Guess what? Sometimes the women in these professional settings, they're there for a reason, because they've earned it. So listen and quit being such an egotistical asshole that you feel like a woman can't tell you what to do. Do we have to get your mamas to slap some sense into you? And other brothers out there too, man. I think we need to especially make sure that we're standing up for our own, especially the women out there too. We have to. When you hear something, you need to say something, and you need to have that back 100%. Period. Because for us, as hard as it is to be a Black man in this country, being a Black woman has got to be 1,000 times harder. Because not only are you dealing with the racism, but you're also dealing with sexism. So men, you need to stand up as well. That's our part. As a man, that's our part to do. Make sure.
I think what he's trying to say, man, is this is the way. Yeah,
this is the way. Be like Mando.
We all understood that reference, and 3 of us are women. So
exactly, and that's the thing. Because I mean, I don't understand. That's the one thing. Like I recently started my own fandom. Well, not my own. Myself and Shane Wilson, my co-host, we started our own fandom Facebook group because I left almost every single Star Wars group that I'm in because there's all this misogyny and racism in it, and I can't deal with it no more. Like, well, one guy got pissed off at Mark Hamill for standing up with John Boyega, and that pissed me off. And then one guy still, he was flipping out on someone for a point that I had made about Kelly Tran and her character Rose being essentially phased completely out of Last Jedi when she was so in Rise of Skywalker, because she was so important in Last Jedi. And it's like, you know what? Because she was an important character. I'm sick of this, the sexism and the racism in sci-fi, because and the alt-right mentality of it. Because it's like, guess what? When you're into sci-fi, guess what? You're on the side of Antifa. If you watch The Matrix and you love Neo, Antifa. All right. If you watch Star Wars and you cheer for Luke and the Rebels, Antifa. Anti-fascism. It's not a bad thing.
It seems like a really good place to end. Do any of you have any parting words for the audience?
Just keep writing and don't be discouraged. We got this. Don't worry. Keep writing those great projects. Keep supporting each other. Keep looking for information. Keep hope alive. Like, seriously, like, because it's some depressing shit going on out here. But we just have to stay supportive of each other and keep doing what we do.
Keep listening to people like these wonderful panelists so that you can arm yourselves for the conversations you have in your own life.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful show. As somebody who works with a small press publisher, like, you know, these conversations are what we need to be having more of, so that we can do better. Because when you know better, do better, right? So I really, really appreciate all of you giving your time and emotional work today to have this conversation with us. I just want to give you all the opportunity to be able to tell us where we can find you online, where we can support you. Yes, we'll start with Tonya. Where can we find you online?
I am Ms. Tonya Todd on all social media. That's MSTONYATODD. And I have a website, MsTonyaTodd.com.
All right. And Brian, where can we find you?
I'm going last.
Okay.
I'm going last. I ain't getting in trouble.
All right. We'll go back in the original order then. Desiree?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Swindle Soiree, SWINDLESOIREE. And I also have a website where I offer editorial services. It's going to be DESIR.EE.
Wonderful. And LaToya, where can we find you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is my website, which is www.lcsliterary.com. I'm open to submissions, so any authors out there that are looking for an agent, please submit to me. All of my guidelines are on my website. For social media, you can check me out under LaToya Smith, or under Twitter, it's @glameditor_girl. At Glam Editor Girl on Instagram, or at LCS Literary Services on Instagram.
All right, and Brian.
You can find me on my website, bryantann.com. That's BRYANTANN.com. If you spell my name with an I, I'm probably going to be not very polite. You can also find me on most forms of social media, either author Brian Tann or Brian Tann author. I sucked at the branding on that one, but you can that's how you can find me. And you can also find me on the Plotaholics podcast, which is plotaholics.com, or on all social media at Plotaholics.
All right, wonderful. And for more great GoIndieNow content, for example, on Monday, we are doing In Progress. So that will be with me. Miss Tonya Todd will be joining us again, and Jacob Rundle, to talk own voices and why representation is so important for people. And so we hope you'll come and check that out. That is Monday the 6th at 9 p.m. EST. That's Eastern Standard Time. And as always, it is always time to go indie now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.